You're watching Smart24 TV, where we drive your business, and my name is Anthony. Of course, right about this time, you know it's financial markets. We bring you live updates from the different global markets that are trending around the world, and giving you, of course, the insights into the top stories around the markets here in East Africa, as well as in the global scene, looking at what's happening on the financial markets world. The show is proudly brought to you by Altex East Africa, your #1 private stock exchange. Now, if you don't know about Altex East Africa, definitely this is a show you must watch to get to know more. But remember, in Uganda today, we have several investments or different asset classes that many people have become, of course, engaged in recently because of inflation. People are looking for more safer, much more safer investments compared to probably the more volatile asset classes at the moment. Now, one way to go is investing in treasury bonds, because as per investment advice from generally most people, they will tell you that this is one of the safest investments, especially in times like these of inflation. And Altex East Africa is giving you a chance to be an investor in this segment by giving you a chance to invest in different treasury bonds, lending to different governments across East Africa. We're talking about governments here in Uganda, which is the government of Uganda, of course, also in Tanzania, in Kenya as well. And the trick here is they have made it so easy that now by simply dialing *292#, you can be able to buy or even sell treasury bonds starting with as little as 15,000. And this is going to be getting money off of your mobile money wallet onto the exchange and being able to purchase all these cool bonds at the best interest you can find on the secondary market here in East Africa. Altex is a body regulated by the Capital Markets Authority and has been in operation since 2018, and so it's something you must venture into if at all you are an enthusiast of investment and getting to easily access these markets and diversify your portfolio. There you have it, my friend. And now that you're joining us, of course, we are going to drive you into the markets. But remember to grab yourself also, if you know you have, for example, a small company and you're looking at getting to list on the exchange. The Uganda Securities Exchange has provided another segment. Of course, we had a growth enterprise market segment, which did not actually perform to the expectations of the exchange. And so now the Uganda Securities Exchange recently launched the Uganda Securities Exchange Dala. And this Dala segment, like the name goes, is a ladder form of getting to raise capital in order for smaller companies and medium enterprises to also get to the level of the blue chips that we see on the main investment segment or the main board of the Uganda Stock Exchange. This registration is still ongoing till the 8th of December. So very simple. If you're out there, you have a company, you are having a net capital not less than 500 millions, definitely this chance is for you. And you can now go to Uganda Securities Exchange offices at Nakawa Business Park and get yourself to register that company. You never know, you could be one of the next big things on the Uganda Stock Exchange. They are doing this to encourage the participation of small enterprises and medium enterprises in terms of getting to participate in the capital markets of Uganda. Others, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to roll in and get to look at the market performances and also get to look at still furthermore on the quarterly bulletin from the Capital Markets Authority. Remember, in this series, we are still trying to break down the third quarter performances, which just ended recently. So we want to analyze and look at the different companies and look at the different asset classes in the capital markets and look at where the opportunities were, where the gaps were, and who performed well, who didn't, according to the Capital Markets Authority. And of course, we shall as well get into that. But looking on the Uganda Stock Exchange, as per yesterday's trades, remember Uganda Securities Exchange market opens at exactly 9 a.m. and closes at 1 p.m. East African Standard Time. And by the close of business yesterday, we had only 3 participants in the Uganda Securities Exchange trading. However, there was a noticeable improvement, at least in the volumes and the turnover as well, given the participants here. And according to the data, MTN Uganda came out as the biggest mover for the day. And when we talk about the movers, we are talking really about people who had the biggest volumes of shares transacted on the stock market. Now, MTN yesterday had about 310,130 shares traded on the Uganda Stock Exchange, and was one of the top movers, actually the top most mover in terms of having the biggest volumes on the market. MTN was closely followed by Wumeme, who came in at 190,061 shares that were transacted on Wumeme at the Uganda Securities Exchange. And Stanbic Bank as well did not actually leave out without participation, after it had about 113,280 shares that were transacted. These were the top 3 movers and participants in the markets here. However, the day ended unfortunately with just 2 gainers, and none of these was a participant in the market. And these are Equity Bank, who gained at a 1.53%, and East African Breweries gaining at about 0.66% on the Uganda Securities Exchange. On the losing side, we had Centum Investments, who came out last at a depreciation of about 4.16%. Centum is one of those companies that has really drastically declined in performance. Currently, we are counting about 249.19 Ugandan shillings per share. But just about a month or 2 ago, the company had shares worth over 330. So that's a very huge decline for Centum Investments. And also coming out on the bottom of the table yesterday here amongst the bottom losers. Centum Investments also wasn't alone in the bottom or on the losing side of the companies here on the Uganda Stock Exchange. Nation Media Group, a cross listing from Nairobi, also lost about 1.03%. Wumeme also went back to 200 shillings and lost about 0.99% of its stock value there on the market yesterday, after of course having this trade of about 190,061 shares. And then when you look at another loser here was Jubilee Holdings, after having lost about 0.84% on the Uganda Stock Exchange. Now, straight up, let's get to look at the details here. For example, let's start with Centum, the bottom loser here, and get to see where the problem is at. And our Centum Investments Company has been listed on the exchange since the 10th of February 2011. And so far, the company has garnered about 166 billion Ugandan shillings worth of shares on the exchange. And this represents about 0.791% of the entire Uganda Securities Exchange. And currently it is the 13th most valuable company on the exchange out of the 18 listed companies. Remember, we have 18 listings. 10 of these are domestically listed companies, and then the other 8 are cross listings. Centum is one of those cross listings that are highly valued and currently in the 13th position in terms of value on the Uganda Stock Exchange. Well, when you look at the graph for performance of the stock price of Centum, it's kind of downwards. When you look at, for example, prices way back in January, they were way above 400 shillings. To be specific, they began the year with about 444 Ugandan shillings per share. And currently we are counting 289 shillings. roughly speaking, we are losing about 200 shillings in a year. And so the year-to-date performance there, you can already guess, is not a good one for Centum Investments Company. When you look at yesterday, they didn't have any trades, and they haven't had any trading activity in a while on the stock exchange. But currently, they still have about 665 million shares that are outstanding on the exchange, and these are valued at, like I mentioned, 166 billion, representing close to 0.8% of the entire Uganda Securities Exchange equity market here. Well, figures look really red and down for Centum when it comes to 1 week performance, 3-month performance, and performance in terms of year to date. None of these is a positive value. So that shows how badly the stock at Centum Investments has been doing on the exchange. And now, looking at, for example, yesterday, they began the day, their last day, when they last traded, which was on the 11th of August. That was the last day they had any transaction in terms of buying or selling shares on the company here at the Uganda Stock Exchange. They had a price of 308.81 Ugandan shillings per share on the Uganda Securities Exchange, recording a 1.9% gain on their previous closing day, which was the 10th of August 2021, from 302 to 308.81 Ugandan shillings. However, Centum Investments began the year with a price of 444.82 Ugandan shillings. But since then, it has shed off over 44% of its value on the stock exchange, and ranking it the 14th company out of 18 in terms of year-to-date performance. Your shares, of course, at Centum are quite at risk at the moment, especially if you bought them last year, because you're looking at a company that has lost 44% of their price valuation. We could close an eye for companies that are active. If you're putting activity on table, at least people can have liquidity. But even the liquidity is not there. There's still a lot really lacking when it comes to Centum Investments Company here at the Uganda Stock Exchange. And looking at their monthly performance, they have lost about 13% of their stock value since the 13th of October in terms of monthly performance or month-on-month performance. Still not something really we can hope for, but we never know. The stock is really surprising. You never know. They could regain their strength. Recently, Centum had to sell some part of its assets, especially in Sidian Bank, to a specific Nigerian bank that took over Sidian Bank. Sidian Bank is a bank mainly in Tanzania and I think also in Kenya as well. But we're seeing that it affected definitely how people viewed Centum, and investors really had to move in a particular direction. And so this could be some of the effects that are rubbing off to Centum stock value losses at the moment that we are witnessing. Like I mentioned, Centum last traded on the 11th of August on the Uganda Securities Exchange, and it traded a volume of 7,800 shares, ending the day with 308.81 Ugandan shillings, after having gained from 302 for that particular day of trading. Now, they had about 5.82 change there. They had a 5.2 shillings gain in price there at that moment. But since then, there has been no activity and only a decline in price from 308 in August to currently 289 Ugandan shillings. That's Centum Investment stock for you. Remember, it's a cross-listing, and we have 8 of other cross-listings here on the Uganda Stock Exchange. And so we will be also looking into what they have to offer as well as regards activity. There is still a huge challenge when it comes to market activity and the the cross listings. you're seeing that many of them are struggling to get to have people interested in buying these shares. We don't know the specific reasons, but maybe people just don't understand maybe what their businesses are all about. And since some of them don't have subsidiaries in Uganda, that could also be a contributing factor. Because if people don't really know what you're dealing in, if people don't see your business, it is hard for them to invest in you. And the cross-listed companies have faced it rough there so far on the exchange. Away from Centum Investments, let's move ahead to MTN Uganda, who was the biggest mover for the day. There's something really about MTN here also in the quarterly bulletin for the Uganda Securities Exchange. Besides also being one of the most active stocks in as far as the third quarter performances are concerned, Uganda Craze, Bank of Baroda rather, Uganda, and MTN Uganda were the two locally listed companies that had the biggest gain in price in the third quarter of 2022, according to the quarterly bulletin for the Uganda Capital Markets Authority. So there's still something here that we will look at concerning MTN. But let's get to first look at the details here of what took place at MTN yesterday. Now, yesterday, MTN had a total volume of close to 130 shares that were transacted on the company, and these are valued at 55.8 million Ugandan shillings, which was still the biggest turnover, one of the biggest turnovers at least for the company in the last few weeks. The shares outstanding, however, are at 22.4 billion shares at the moment at MTN Uganda, and currently their market capitalization is valued at 4.03 trillion Ugandan shillings, representing over 19.2% of the entire Uganda Securities Exchange equity market there on the Uganda Securities Exchange, which is almost like a quarter of the entire exchange. And so this brings MTN to the second most valuable position in terms of market capitalization on the Uganda Securities Exchange. Looking at yesterday's trades, MTN yesterday closed with a price of 180.00 Ugandan shillings, which was the same price with which the company began the day. Now, as per the data from the beginning of the year, MTN began the year with 194.99 Ugandan shillings. And since the year began, MTN Uganda has lost close to 7.69% of their price valuation, ranking them the sixth on the Uganda Stock Exchange in terms of year-to-date performance, which is not a very bad performance compared with other stocks. But of course, people would have expected more from a company that is, valued at 4 trillion on the Uganda Securities Exchange. The entire exchange market, equities market on the Uganda Securities Exchange is worth about 21 trillion. And so if you're taking 4 million of that, you must really be something. And so there's still a lot that investors are still looking for in MTN on the Uganda Stock Exchange, particularly the investors in the initial public offer. We understand MTN was one of the unique IPOs, being the first electronic IPO to come on board. People were able to buy shares on their phones. People who had no idea what shares were all about were able for the first time to buy shares in MTN Uganda. And so there was a lot of fascination and a lot of interest, but sooner than later, the company started losing value in terms of the stock price from 200 shillings to 190 in January, rather 94 to be specific, 194 shillings. And then in February, by the time we hit Valentine's Day in February, the company was counting over 40 shillings off their initial public offer stock price from 200 shillings to over 160 shillings. And This was because of the, probably we should call it the lack of information, or the people not understanding really what the stock market is all about. And many people are complaining, saying we bought shares at 200, how can we sell at 160, and how can we sell at a lower price? But, you know, people couldn't understand the fact that stocks actually go up or down with demand and supply. And so this was one of the factors that really pulled down MTN stock in the first place at the beginning of the year. And then later on, we saw the stock picking up from 160 shillings in Feb up to 170, and then averaging at 180, between 180 and 190 from the months of March to date. And to date, we are still counting MTN at 180.0 Ugandan shillings. And this was the opening and closing price for the company yesterday. Now, there's still many people who meet me and still ask me about our money, you know. And MTN, of course, was able to declare a dividend, at least for this year, and they were declaring about 4.7 shillings per share. Meaning if someone, for example, possessed 1,000 shares, they walked away with just 4,000 shillings. And many people are disappointed by this. They had huge expectations of, making huge amounts of money. But later on, I think probably they go to understand. And this is something we must clarify on as, dealers in the market. It's not a Ponzi scheme. It's not a gambling, kind of avenue. It's an investment. You don't plant, for example, maize today and you come out tomorrow and demand for grain. It takes time. You have to give your stock time. Now, MTN is the last listing we've had on the exchange, and it's a very young stock. It's a very promising stock. It is the only telecommunications company on the Uganda Stock Exchange currently. That alone should be a factor to reckon, and to say, what, there is something we should expect. We should expect more telecommunications companies to come on board and create competition. This will create value for the stocks, and this could be maybe in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years. And this is the vision many people were lacking when they were getting into buying MTN stock, and they got everything wrong, and that's why many were very disappointed in the first place, looking at how MTN was performing. But I really look at MTN as one of those potential companies, and one of those companies we might have explosion, of value anytime, because first of all, the profits are very good in the company. It's under very good governance, and the leadership is good. The services are good, and so there's a lot really. The innovation, the level of innovation in the company also is very high, and so those are some factors you can look at and actually credit a company for what it has been able to do. MTN Uganda is not doing that bad on the exchange, given of course the bad atmosphere in which the entire economy is at the moment. For example, speaking of activity, MTN is the third most traded on stock on the Uganda Securities Exchange. And within the last 3 months, it has traded close to over 8.87 million shares on the market, and about an average of 140,716 shares on average, and a total of about 1.69 billion shillings worth of turnover. That is something. That is something you can take home with you. And so it's an opportunity, and definitely we should open our eyes and get to appreciate some of the companies here on the Uganda Stock Exchange. Of course, MTN, to just remind you, was the biggest mover for the day. And when we talk about movement, we're really talking about the biggest trader, or the person with the biggest share of the market for the day. MTN took that yesterday with about a volume of 300,000 shares that was transacted on the Uganda Stock Exchange. That's it for MTN. Our time is fast spent. We are taking a quick breather, commercial break, and when we return, we want to summarize some of the other stock performances, especially from Wumeme and Stanbic, and then look at the all-share index, and then we will cross over to the Capital Markets Authority Bulletin, before going on to Nairobi Stock Exchange to also have a look at what happened in the land of Uhuru. Stay with us. You're watching Smart 24 TV, and we drive your business.